Good evening and welcome to the Final Yard Dolphins postgame show on Five. My name is Eric Wiedeke. You can follow me on Twitter at Eric Wiedeke. I am joined by Michael Quirk and Duke. And guys, I'm just gonna get into it right away with this one. I'm still trying to find the words to process this loss, really, as the Dolphins fall 28-27 to the Tennessee Titans in what can only be described as an implosion by the Miami Dolphins over the last 2.5 minutes or so of that football game. Guys, I'm going to let you guys run with it for a little while here and just give me your thoughts. I'll start with Duke. You go ahead and start me off with your thoughts in this one.
Well, they're supposed to take care of business, and they didn't. Terrible loss. Shouldn't have lost to this team. But it was that kind of a weekend. If you look around the NFL, only a handful of higher-seeded teams won, and a lot of lower-seeded teams won. The Giants won tonight over the Packers. It's just one of those kind of weeks. I kind of felt that way yesterday when I saw the scores. Like, man, it's going to be that kind of game, and it was. The offense looked rough without Hill out there. Just bad. They still can take care of their business, but now they have to win week 17 in Baltimore if they want to get if they want home field. So they've still got what they want before them, but it's just can't have this kind of loss. But then again, all the other top teams have suffered a bad loss against teams they shouldn't have. I guess it was Miami's turn, so whatever.
Michael?
Yeah, this wasn't for me a game where you look and say, hey, the Titans played inspired football or anything like that. The only thing the Titans really did well tonight was take what Miami was giving them in that last 4 minutes, where for some reason the Dolphins were just letting everything stay in front of them as if there was a minute and a half left, when really there was more than 4 minutes on the clock, and just spears all the way down the field, just wide open, leave Nuke Hopkins wide open. This was an unforgivable loss for Miami. It's just unfathomable to lose to Will Levis and this team, especially when you're up 2 touchdowns with 4 minutes to play. And the way that the team looked in that last 4 minutes is like they thought this game was only played for 56 minutes. Mike McDaniel makes those jokes all the time with the media when say, hey, you have the most yards in NFL history after 7 games. He goes, okay, let me know what that gets us. The game is 60 minutes. The team played 56 minutes, and not a good 56 minutes. I know we can point to a slew of injuries. Like I said, the one thing the Titans did well was they did get after Tua. They did get pressure on Tua, and it's because you have Liam Eichenberg playing center, and you have no Robert Hunt, you have no Teron Armstead, and of course Tyreek getting hurt was a big loss for Miami, because obviously he wasn't the same even the few plays he was back on the field. And having him out, I mean, listen, Tua is tremendous. Tua is a franchise quarterback. Tua is this franchise quarterback, and he should be top 10 in the MVP, but Tyreek Hill is the MVP of this team. And Tyreek Hill is the guy who's in the running for the MVP of the league, because we saw how different the team looked without him out there. And it's just absolutely unbelievable to let this Titans team, at a place where you've been incredibly good for the last few years, have been so good at home, and the Titans just stormed down the field, 2 touchdowns in the last 4 minutes. The Dolphins just looked discombobulated on both sides of the ball. It was just a bad loss. Bad loss all around, where the Dolphins should have won about 5 different ways tonight, but never really took the game. When they thought they took the game, they thought the game was over and just let it be. I mean, I don't even care about that fumble inside the 5 on the first drive, because of course Zach Sealer gets the touchdown right there anyway. But you have a field goal blocked, a 44-yarder. that would have been the difference in the game. It's just so bad all around that there's nothing really good that you can take from this. And in the NFL, there are no gimme games. Even you still have to buckle it up against the Carolina Panthers. This isn't college football where you have insert Sunbelt team here coming to play you. But this is a bad football team that came to your place when you have the Cowboys, the Ravens, and the Bills coming to town after the Jets. Which can we take the Jets for granted after we lose to the Titans at home? My God! But when you're playing for the 1 seed, you win this game and you're back in first over the Ravens. And you have a game against the Ravens coming up. The Chiefs drop one. The Jaguars drop one. Everything's in front of you, but you still have to go out there and take it. And the Dolphins just had it taken to them.
So there's a million different places we can go, right? With where this team kind of failed in this ball game. I think, it's almost tough because you look at a game like this and you see such a colossal failure and you want to have the one thing to blame. And it feels like there's just several failures in just about every phase of the game, whether it's Mike McDaniel on those short yardage situations, not running the football in the red zone, whether it's the offensive line, especially after Connor Williams goes down, Liam Eichenberg back at center. That experience is just awful. Tyreek Hill coming off the field takes a layer of explosiveness off of this team. And then they go super soft in the last 4.5 minutes of this ball game. Let Will Levis and the Titans just kind of drive down the field, get 2 easy scores, and the Dolphins just kind of act like, to your point, they just have this one in hand. And something that I'm starting to wonder with this football team, and I'm going to pose this question to you. It feels like the Dolphins this week got more positive coverage following their 45-15 victory over the Commanders than they had in a while, because the Dolphins were the 1 seed and they were, all of a sudden it looked like they were kind of becoming one of those it teams again in the NFL. And then all of a sudden, just like kind of the last few times that this has happened to them, they fall flat on their face. And this time they do it in front of on national TV, in front of an audience. Good luck convincing anyone that the Dolphins are legit ever again, unless they beat the Cowboys. Because if they beat the Jets, that's not proving anything. When does this team learn how to handle success?
Yeah. I mean, to your point about the Dolphins being able to run the ball and should have run the ball in those short yardage sets, they ran the ball tonight 31 times for more than 5 yards a carry. Trust what you're seeing on the field in front of you. With Jeffrey Simmons, who I posted on Twitter about Jeffrey Simmons being nominated for Walter Payton Man of the Year is a joke, but that's for a completely different show. But you run the ball there. And something that I kept coming back to in that second half was Bradley Chubb on that 3rd and 10 where there was a scramble for, I think, 5 yards. And then he should have had the sack. Yes, that's bad in its own right that he had him dead to rights and didn't get Will Levis down to the ground. But then chasing it down, made a great play, but takes off his helmet and slams it into the ground. That's when the Titans were going to set up for a long field goal, but instead they're able to go down and score a touchdown on that drive. You've been in the league long enough to know not to do that. When you get to the sidelines, have at it. Break the helmet if you want. But doing that on the field after you get them to 4th down, it's just, I don't know. The team, you can't speak to their focus because, we weren't in those meeting rooms. We weren't on that practice field. We weren't on that sideline. But there were so many mental mistakes here. Tua just left Jalen Waddle out to dry on Jalen's second catch when he briefly left the game. Later on, he left Devon Achane out to dry on 1 out in the flats. That's not typically something Tua does. That's something that he can work around is anticipating the defense a bit better than that. Other than the running game, there's a lot of mental mistakes and seemingly a lack of focus and a lack of prep for this one that the Dolphins just didn't look ready to dominate a team they should have dominated all night.
Yeah, it was odd because this was a game that, you know, I'm going to be very honest with you, Michael. I came into this one as cocky as can be. I finally started to believe. I finally let myself believe. I came into this one. I was cocky. I was peacocking. I didn't think the Titans were going to score more than 10 points in this game. And they summarily embarrass me. And the thing about it is, you look at this team overall, and it feels like you could look at a bunch of things, and that's not to take away from some of the other things in the game that happened. I mean, you look at the Titans. I think it was their first or their second drive. DeAndre Hopkins commits what amounts to pretty blatant pass interference offensively on Xavier Howard. Xavier Howard then catches an interception out of bounds and then drops an interception in the end zone on 2 consecutive plays. And it just feels like one of these things where it's just this constant building of failures. Jason Sanders gets his kick blocked. It just didn't feel like there was any point where they stacked momentum on top of each other. They would do something and then they would take 2 steps back immediately. You know, I kind of settled into a point in this game in the third quarter where I said to myself, well, they're going to win, but I'm not going to be happy about it. And I only wish that was the case at this point, because what's happened here is, I mean, really nothing short of disaster. And you look at, and it's just all around and so all encompassing that, you know, I struggle to kind of find the words to describe exactly what happened, because there's just so many failures on so many levels. And it's not just because of the injuries. I know that when Tyreek Hill went out, that they were not the same offensively. But you thought in the third quarter that they kind of found something with the Cedric Wilson stuff that they were doing, and he looked really good. He made a nice contested catch. He drew a pass interference, and then Cedric Wilson kind of disappears from the game after that. So there was just no consistency at any point in this game. It's just baffling to me how this is the same Dolphins team that we saw in the first 12 games of the season, because quite frankly, I mean, I hate to go there, but like this was definitely one of those classic same old Dolphins kinds of games.
Yeah, and something that we've talked about and something that's been, you know, discussed by talking heads outside of South Florida as well is the Dolphins have not played their best game. You know, despite being 9-4, you kept saying, oh, they won this game. They won this game by double digits, what have you. But the Dolphins haven't played their best game. I mean, I guess you could say the Denver Broncos game hanging 70, probably the best game a team is capable of playing. But as of late, that it just seems like even though they've been winning lots of games, that you're not seeing them fully click. And we're 13 games in. We're in the middle of December. You know, if you're not seeing it all clicking now, and something has seemed off through the wins and the losses for the last, you know, month and a half or so, that are you going to see it against the Jets? Is it going to be against the Cowboys? Is it going to be against the Ravens? Is it going to be Buffalo? Is it going to be in the playoffs? When is it going to be? And this is not what you want to see from your team in week 14. Is you have everything to play for, to win the division, to get the number 1 seed, home field throughout the playoffs, and a bye, to not only skip forward and not have to play a game in the first week of the playoffs, but get a week of rest for Javon Holland, for Armstead, for Hunt, for Tua, for Tyreek. Tyreek, despite playing in every game this year, while he hasn't been injured, has been hurt consistently. You keep seeing him hurt seemingly every part of his body that he'll come off for a play or two and then right back in the game. Obviously, Jalen Waddle has had some injury problems as well. That get healthy. You have so much to play for at this point, and then you lay an absolute egg. The only thing that I can hope for is something that we haven't seen from those Dolphins teams of past, is hopefully a wake-up game. I mean, you shouldn't need a wake-up call in a 17-game season in the NFL, but maybe that's what this is. Maybe this was maybe someone's in that locker room giving the Tebow speech right now. I'm sure it's absolute hell in that locker room. And honestly, it should be, because, the standard that these guys have for themselves, that's not it. That wasn't close to it. And so hopefully this can be something where these guys take that emotion. And I know I'm getting into the intangible Rudy from Notre Dame kind of part of the football, but hopefully they can take that, harness that, and come back with a level of focus and beat the ever-living shit out of the Jets, which they should, and they should have done tonight to the Titans.
Well, that's the thing is you wanted to see that game where everything kind of came together. And I thought that they had that game. I thought last week against Washington, you saw the defense kind of play one of their best games of the season against an offense that's kind of competent. And I thought you saw the offense kind of get back on track after they kind of struggled in the middle portion of the season here. So I thought that you were looking at a team that was kind of trending in the right direction. And that's ultimately what led me to believing that they were going to end up blowing out the Titans here. But that wasn't the case. And the one thing that I will say about this game, I really, really hope that this was not, I mean, obviously I hope for the best for the health of the players on the Dolphins, but I do not want to hear that this was a situation where they were just being really extra cautious with guys and they held them out because they believed that they could get past the Titans without it. Because when you play those kinds of games, this is exactly what ends up happening. And I know that you want to keep a long-term mentality in this season, but when you get to a point in December where home field advantage is decided, where seeding is decided, you can't play those kinds of games with your players. So I really, really hope that this isn't a situation where they thought they were being cautious and they could hold guys out. This is a Dolphins team where, and like you said, it should be absolute hell in that locker room right now. Because it doesn't get easier. They played the Jets, and not to make too much of the Jets, but Zach Wilson has a career game last week, and they hold the Texans offense with CJ Stroud to 6 points midway through the fourth quarter before he goes out with a concussion. So this is a Jets team that is fired up and ready to, they still have something to play with, they play for. They haven't been eliminated just yet. Not to say that they think that they're going to make the playoffs or anything like that. I think that that's a settled, point at this point. But they still want to beat the Dolphins and make sure that the Dolphins either don't win the division or don't get into the playoffs, what have you. This is going to be this is kind of like a turning point for the season. Either the Dolphins from here kind of get it together, or they don't, and it could really go either way. And I'm not sure which way I lean. The reports about the Connor Williams injury being potentially season ending is a massive damper on this one for me, because I looked at Liam Eichenberg earlier in the season, and then I looked at Liam Eichenberg again today playing center. It's not pretty. This Dolphins offensive line, with where they are right now, this configuration, when you have Kendall Lamb and you have Lester Cotton and you have Liam Eichenberg and you have Robert Jones, it's not good. I mean, even Austin Jackson got beat a couple times. Now, granted, that was Harold Landry on the other side, and he's a great pass rusher. But, it's just one of those things where you set everything up, you tee it up for the Dolphins, and they just completely whiff on this game. And go ahead.
It's the trenches, to your point, really were disappointing tonight on both ends. I mean, sure, you have the touchdown from Zach Sealer where he just made a monster of a play. And I know on the offensive line, you're missing your two best offensive linemen for the entire game and your third best offensive lineman for the majority of the game. But Tua was sacked 5 times. That was a concern. There were times he was holding on to the ball too long. I'd give, Tua credit for a couple of those sacks. But at least I'm not using injuries as an explanation as to why the Dolphins didn't win this game, because that was not the reason they didn't win this game. Certainly didn't help, but the Dolphins should have won this game with the guys they had on the field to start the game and at the end of the game. But that's not an excuse on the defensive line. The defensive line, there was 1 sack on a horrible Titans offensive line. The Titans are starting a rookie at left tackle. The entire offensive line has been in question all year. If you talk to a single person around the Titans, it's been a bloodbath, that entire unit. 1 sack, and the Dolphins had 3 tackles for loss, 2 of which were by David Long. That's not going to get it done against a unit like that, especially when you have the Dallas Cowboys coming up. You have the Baltimore Ravens coming up. You have much better offensive lines. You're going to need to get home. You're going to need to get to the quarterback, especially in those last 2 drives. I mean, Will Levis had all the time in the world. When he completed that deep pass to Hopkins on that final drive, I mean, good Lord, give the guy a book to read while he's back there. It was just, that was what was really disappointing to watch for me. Did I see something that your eyes didn't there?
No. I mean, the defensive line, the 1 sack that they got was Christian Wilkins, but aside from that, they were pretty non-existent for the most part. I mean, they did an okay job kind of keeping Derrick Henry kind of, bottled up for most of the game, but I think that maybe they might have focused a little bit too much on him because they let guys like DeAndre Hopkins just absolutely smoke the secondary in this one, but it was particularly because Will Levis didn't have a ton of time to operate. I guess the way that I would sum up this game is there were a million things that had gone wrong for the Dolphins. But the really frustrating part, and I think this is the frustrating part for everyone, is that if one of those things goes right, of the million things that went wrong in that game, the Dolphins win that football game. If Mike McDaniel decides that, he wants to run the football in the red zone and they come away with 6 instead of 3 in one of those red zone situations, that's your difference in the game. Now, that's not to say that, this wasn't that bad of a loss. It was an awful loss. And it's even worse because of the fact that there were so many mistakes, and they're so correctable too. These are mistakes that you should not be seeing in week 14. This is stuff that, and especially the coaching stuff, your team by now. Mike McDaniel knows his football team. Vic Fangio knows his defense. I can't explain what I saw out of them in this football game tonight. It's just so disheartening to see, because you get to a point where you think that they're kind of past this, and now you have to question almost everything you thought about this team prior to this week. And there's going to be a lot of soul searching that has to be done. Overall, like you said, Tua's still the guy. I'm not being that over dramatic about it. I'm not Tua needs to go. I'm not firing Mike McDaniel. I trust these guys to eventually right the ship. But these are not mistakes that should be made in week 14. And I think that you'd absolutely wholeheartedly concur with that.
Oh, without question. Over the course of an NFL season, and to your point, Derrick Henry, 17 rushes, 34 yards. Longest run of the day, 6 yards. If you told me that before tonight, Will Levis is going to have to throw for 300 to beat you. Yeah, sure. I'll take it. Let him do it. but over the course of an NFL season, you're going to have coin flip games. Some things that go your way, some things that don't. And if you look at the Dolphins over the course of the year, close games against the Chargers, coin flip, defense won that one at the end. Patriots, touchdown game there, the one in New England. The Chiefs game in Germany came up on the wrong side of that one. So you're 2-1, and those Raiders needed the heroic interception from Jalen Ramsey at the end. I mean, that one I felt less of a coin flip, but that one was tight. And obviously the Raiders were driving with a chance to tie that one. So now you're, 3-2 in these sort of close, call them coin flip games. That's going to happen, but it shouldn't have ever been a coin flip. With all the talk about what happened in the Chiefs-Bills game with the Tony call and all that, people blaming the refs and this, that, and the other. And, you hear that every week, that there's some fan base who's griping about, oh, the refs this, or this late injury that, or this play call here. Against the Titans, you shouldn't have yourself in that position to where, and I have no qualms with the refereeing in this game, other than, of course, what you mentioned earlier about Hopkins just dragging Xavier Howard to the ground on what very clearly could have been and probably would have been an interception by Xavier Howard, and instead is a long catch for Nuke Hopkins. But when you have all these things that, you're saying, hey, if they could have gotten that first down at the end, they're getting close to field goal range, could kick it and win. Or if Bradley Chubb didn't slam his helmet and extend that drive, if that field goal wasn't blocked, this, that, and the other, you shouldn't be in a place where there is an if this, if that against this team. That's something that against the Chiefs, sure. Against the Eagles, the Bills, fine. But against this Titans team, against Will Levis, it's just unforgivable at this point.
And it's almost an odd thought to have, but the fact that they were up 27-13 with 5 minutes left, we can be honest with ourselves and say that was kind of a mirage, right? Like it took a really fluky special teams play. Defense comes up on the next drive, gets them that touchdown. Like, for all intents and purposes, they kind of got set up there at 27-13, because that made it look a lot more like the Dolphins were in control of that game than they really were. All the way through, there was not really a point in which the Dolphins were ever in control of this football game. And that's not to say that, and that's not to make any excuses for the Dolphins and losing the lead that they did 27-13 with 5 minutes to play. I guess it's really to highlight the fact that the Dolphins didn't just stumble into this loss. The Dolphins kind of lost this game over the full 60 minutes of this one. You go back to talking about the referees. I wish that we could do this post game and talk about the referees for 30 minutes and go on about that. I'd feel much better if that was the topic than what we're talking about right now. But with this Dolphins team, it's just a complete collapse. And I never want to hear Louis Riddick and Dan Orlovsky, wax poetic about the Dolphins ever again. Just don't. I don't want to hear positivity coming out of the national commentators ever again. I can't do it. I can't do it with them.
We've spent a lot of time this season and in past seasons lamenting how an announcer has talked about certain players or certain teams when we go against them. I mean, we just talked about it as a fan base in a game we weren't even playing in last night, when Tony Romo was talking all about Josh Allen could be an MVP candidate. They could win the division, play these games at home, and yada yada. Louis Riddick, for maybe the first time in Dolphins history, was the opposite of that tonight. There was times I was noticing it as a Dolphins fan where, Tua throws an incompletion and he's like, that's just a tremendous play right there by Tua. And, he saw his first read was there. I was like, man, it's an incompletion. Relax. It felt like, if I was a Titans fan, I fully would have been like, it feels like Louis Riddick is rooting for the Dolphins here. He kind of wants to be proven right about what he's been saying on Twitter to trolls and what he's been saying to analysts on Get Up and whatnot. And the Dolphins really didn't give him that much of a chance to do that. Yeah, you're right. It'd be much easier to reconcile this loss if we could just say, hey, you know what, that interference call there, but there wasn't. I mean, it was not a game that came down to the referees. The Titans had more penalties than the Dolphins did tonight, and the Titans outplayed Miami. This wasn't. Now, if you look at the grand scheme of things, when people say the better team didn't win, yeah, I think everyone can objectively say the Dolphins are a better team than Tennessee. But today, the better team won that game. Tennessee played better than Miami. And I 100% agree with you on the Mirage piece because, listen, you have to put yourself in the right position to be there and to be opportunistic. They muffed that punt. You shouldn't have touched that punt. Dolphins, give them credit, there to recover. Was that Elijah Campbell was there to fall on that ball. All the credit to Elijah Campbell for getting down there. But the Titans shouldn't have let that happen. And then on the fumble, this isn't Bradley Chubb blowing through and ripping the ball out. This was Will Levis throwing it 103 miles an hour on the black. Like, what is he doing on that pitch? Just put a ton of heat on it and threw it up at Derrick Henry. I can't imagine he was thrilled with that when he got to the sideline. But that, again, kudos to the Dolphins for being there to fall on the football. But that wasn't going and making a play. And so the Dolphins execute on a couple short fields by doing what, Eric? They ran the football. I want to see them run it 40 times against the Jets next week.
Yeah, next week against the Jets, this is going to be, again, a game that should be won. Again, a game that shouldn't even be particularly close, realistically, especially if you take into account what the Dolphins did in the Meadowlands the last time these teams faced off. Now, granted, that was against Tim Boyle. That wasn't against Zach Wilson. But this is not – the Jets are not a team that the Dolphins should have an issue with, especially at home. And I would hope coming off of the loss that the Dolphins are going to be a little bit more focused going into this week against the Jets. Duke led it off by saying this was kind of one of those weird weeks in the NFL, and I'll give it to him. It absolutely was to an extent. But that kind of takes the Dolphins off the hook a little bit, and I just can't do that for them this week. I guess my final thoughts in this one are this is a Dolphins team that is going to have to kind of go back to the drawing board after this one, and they're going to have to get healthy and quickly. Javon Holland, Robert Hunt, Teron Armstead, maybe not Armstead because of his lingering injury issues. And I understand Kendall Lamb, really, of all the backup linemen that you have, Kendall Lamb is easily the one that you can live with the most. But I need to see them get healthier, and I need to see a renewed focus with this team. And like you said, I need to see them run the ball 40 times. Now, granted, they ran the ball a decent amount tonight. Raheem Mostert got over 20 touches. Usually when Raheem Mostert gets over 20 touches, I'm not complaining about the run game, how much they're running the football, because they're doing what they should be doing with that. Devon Achane having 7 carries in this game is not good enough. This is a guy that needs to be getting somewhere between 10 to 15 carries on this football team, even with Raheem Mostert healthy and toting the rock. That's not me saying that Raheem Mostert needs to take a step back in his role. That's just me saying Devon Achane needs to be a bigger part of this offense going forward as part of the emphasis on the run game. So those are kind of my final thoughts heading into the Jets game. Just really terrible loss. Just forget about it. There was never a game on December 11th, 2023. I don't know what anybody's talking about. The Dolphins are 9-3. This will be a 16-game season for all I care. Just beat the Jets, beat them by a lot, enough to make me forget about this game and move on. That's kind of my final thoughts on this one. And yours, Michael?
Yeah, first I want to touch on Achane. I didn't realize this till I just saw it in the box score. Achane was the most targeted Dolphin tonight. He was targeted 9 times in the passing game. As you mentioned, 7 carries. He got 47 yards on those 7 carries. And then in the pass game, 5 catches for 24 yards. I want to be very clear with what I'm pointing out there. That's not a Devon Achane problem. 5 catches for 24 yards is Devon Achane not being put in the right position to succeed there. Because if Achane gets the ball in space, we know where Achane goes.
He had the opportunity, though. We talked about individual moments throughout this game. Devon Achane slowing down on that go ball is definitely one of those moments that we can talk about. And that's not to say that it's, again, you cannot distill this down to one particular moment, but that is one of those moments that you can point to and say, well, maybe that could have changed the game. But to your point, you're absolutely right. The Dolphins need to put Devon Achane in spots, because I noticed, and you see it on that last drive, Tua takes a long time to hit his checkdowns. It's not 1-2, boom, hit my check down. It's 1-2, 3 Mississippi, 4 Mississippi, and then you hit your check down. And by the time you've hit your check down, the defense is already keyed in on it. You've got 3 defenders coming down at him. That processing has to speed up a little bit for Tua when he's hitting his check down. And I can admit that I still think he's the guy, but I can admit that's definitely a flaw of his game.
That very well could be a product of letting his doubters have a tiny bit of real estate. Now they don't have anything on Star Island living up there, but they may have a condo up there saying, "Hey, check down merchant." And so he's just looking downfield. When you have Raheem Mostert and Devon Achane and Alec Ingold just had that one catch, but he had some terrific blocks tonight, and he is absolutely a threat in the passing game. There's times where, listen, it's great when you have Tyreek and Jalen Waddle and so forth downfield, and there's always those plays there. And listen, we've seen it all year. But sometimes take what the defense is giving you and let your playmakers do what they do. My final thought is I work for a Green Bay Packers fan, and so he and I probably just not going to exchange any pleasantries in the morning. And if anyone else asked me, there was one Monday Night Football game tonight, because there's always one Monday night game. Why would there be 2? What are you talking about? You sound crazy. I'm going to internalize this and be angry about this until the Jets game. I really will. I'm not going to feel better about anything. I was planning on a Tuesday morning of reading up on everything Dolphins I can, looking at different clinching scenarios, checking out anything and everything brought up on YouTube for the Miami Dolphins. Now I'm just sick to my stomach. This show is brought to us by Prize Picks, but I feel like Pepto-Bismol is the only company on my mind right now because I'm physically nauseous. The Dolphins have really 2 roads they can go down. The meme of the car screeching to a stop to go down another lane, where it was Dolphins, hey, easy sailing to the 1 seed, or hey, create some chaos for yourself. And the Dolphins just chose that hard right turn that they've done for a quarter century. But you really have 2 places to go if you're the Dolphins now. Is this indicative of who you are, and you are going to let some of these issues fester and you're not going to correct them? and you're not going to realize what you have to change and commit to that, or you use this as fuel and say, mother of God, how did we let that slip? It's not the games that you win that live in players and coaches' minds. It's the games that you lose, especially in infuriating fashion like tonight. And so the Dolphins need to go bury the Jets. The Dolphins need to go out there, jump on them early, run the ball down their throat, be selective in when they take their shots in the passing game, and just beat the Jets by double digits, get back on track. And Duke was only with us for a short time. He's not on to a more peaceful place or anything. He's just not on the stream, but he was on the right path in that everything is still in front of Miami. Miami's not eliminated from the playoffs. We've been there in week 17s in the past. This is week 14 of an 18-week season. Not only are the Dolphins not eliminated from the postseason, not only are they not eliminated from the division, they still lead the division by 2 games over the Bills and still have the Bills at home. They still have an under 500 team coming to Miami to play. The team that they're chasing for the 1 seed, you end in a tie with them, you still have that tie-breaking game left on the schedule to win. So there's still everything in front of the Dolphins if they play good football, if they're able to recover from this. And so while this is a devastating loss, there's still reasons to be optimistic. It's just I'm sure I'm not alone in that I won't feel all that happy and gleeful and like a reason of the season movie television special on CBS until I can see the Dolphins over the Jets 35-13 or something of the ilk. But yeah, I'm sorry for rambling. I'm at a rare place in this world where I'm at a loss for words while saying a ton of words. And I guess that's just where I can leave it tonight.
Well, Michael, I want to thank you for coming on. And I do want to just say one thing. I'm sure Duke is in a more peaceful place than this stream is right now. I can definitely assure you of that. So I want to thank you. I want to thank Duke for coming on for the first few minutes. I want to thank Manny for producing. I want to thank Prize Picks for being the sponsor. Remember to use promo code 5 on your first deposit for an initial deposit match of up to $100. That's Prize Picks. That's promo code FIVE. So thank you guys and have a great night. We will hopefully be back next week talking about a Jets game in pregame and then a victory over the Jets in postgame. Otherwise, you can come in here and watch our increasingly deteriorating mental health. So that should be fun as well. So thank you guys and have a wonderful weekend.